Welcome into the Biscuit. Lauren, pen name L.A. Fields. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm here in front of my shower curtain with rainbow lights behind it. We were discussing it before the recording started. Little, you know, low fancy decor. So,
Yeah, that's rad home decor there.
It looks great. I
You
totally
got
thought that was a real tree.
you got an
yeah,
LED tree situation.
some of these shower curtains are really nice looking and they take up a whole wall. So you don't have to get anything
Well,
framed. You just pin them up there.
we're gonna do proper intros, but where are you from, real quick?
I'm originally from Florida. So from
Uh-huh.
birth to college, Florida.
Yeah.
Lived in Chicago, Georgia, South Korea, and currently in Dallas.
Oh, nice. You sounded very much like my mom just then when you said some of these shower curtains are real nice.
Yeah, they, it's not like they used to make them. Yeah.
It's all boring
I
and
got to do
bland.
this sidetrack real quick because I've been dying to say this in front of DJ and I keep forgetting. And now we have a Florida girl on the pod. So the Florida man, Florida woman thing.
Mhm.
I read recently, I want to know your opinion on this as someone who spent a lot of time there, that Florida has the most lax laws when it comes to keeping information private about an arrest.
Yeah, they
So
do.
that is actually why the Florida man became a thing, because literally the moment someone gets arrested and accused of anything, they're allowed to go public with it. Whereas in some
Huh.
places you got to wait till they're processed or this or that. Is that true? And or is it nah? They just they fighting gators on meth down there.
Well, I'm pretty sure that it's true that they put people on blast immediately. Like as soon as they take your picture in a police station, like they're like, I own this picture now. I can do whatever I want with it. As far as like meth and gators, one of my earliest memories is seeing an alligator like just in the canal out by my house. So, and my dad teaching me, like, okay, you see, his head is in the water and the tail is on the bank. That's what we call that, a bank. And that's where I learned that word. So they just hang out. They've got four legs. They run faster than everything with two legs. That's the thing to remember. They look slow. They are not
Yeah.
slow.
They
So
can't
you're
zigzag,
saying,
right?
so you're basically saying as many gators and as much meth there, it's more than happened once that a man on meth has wrestled a gator.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Especially a
think
small gator. People get confident thinking,
right.
no way, that's a baby. Like,
I think the lesson I took from when I read about that was if this is true, what I'm learning is everywhere has Florida men. I'm not learning that there aren't Florida men in Florida.
yeah.
But
Well, let's move
There's
on. Let's
Louisiana
not,
men. There's Jersey men. You know people are messing up everywhere. Yeah.
bro, Jersey man. I don't even want to know what that's like. In Virginia, West Virginia, they got the Mothman. I don't want to force you to defend or disparage where you grew up. Sometimes where you're from is just that. Let's get into it. We asked LA to be on the pod today because she has written numerous books and had some very interesting topics as far as storytelling goes. That she emailed us and said, "What if we talk about this?" And I'm going to be honest, I was blown away from your ideas. I was like, man, we went from like real general, like, what about stories about family to these very specific. I don't want to give too much away. I'll let you, I guess, introduce the first topic and/or story.
All right. So I'll kind of give a little TED talk here. I do have like 11 published books, and most of them involve gay, lesbian, mostly gay men. But we'll discuss that in more detail. So I'm going to give a little
Okay.
TED talk.
And do
So,
all of them
my name
have?
is Lauren, but I
Oh,
publish
sorry.
under my initials L.A. Fields. I refer to myself as a Jill of all trades for writing because my books include novels and short stories, contemporary and historical, scholarship, and erotica. The topic I'd like to discuss today is fiction writing around real people. So, one method involves fictionalizing real people, and the other involves putting real people into fiction. First up, Homo Superiors. Get that in the shot. Whee! Um, this is a retelling of the Leopold and Loeb crime of 1924, set post cell phones and pre COVID. They were teenage thrill killers who murdered a 14-year-old boy to see if they were smart enough to get away with it. And spoiler alert, they were not. Okay. So while writing this book, I went to Rose Hill Cemetery in Chicago to find the victim's mausoleum, which is chained shut against looky-loos like me. but it's also decorated with tiny toys and flowers and remembrances from visitors that aren't me, basically. So we're not all bad. Some people go there for the right reasons, respectfully. I also found the parents of both of the killers who are buried there, to whom I apologize for essentially digging up these graves again and giving an infamous case more oxygen. Full disclosure, I did have my picture taken on the Leopold obelisk and the Loeb bench, but cemeteries are for the living, not the dead, so that's okay in my book. In my book, Homo Superiors, their family structures are the same. The names are similar. Instead of Leopold and Loeb, it's Kaplan and Klein. But typewriter letters become text, and I felt a lot more comfortable taking artistic license. For example, Leopold's mother died on him about the same age that mine did, at 16. I feel freer to invest some of my feelings into a character based on a real person than I would attributing those thoughts to him specifically. An interesting fact, though, is that Leopold was actually very litigious about another fictionalized book published during his lifetime called Compulsion, which was made into a big movie with Orson Welles. He obnoxiously took notes during the legal talks in a dead language, Sanskrit, so that no one else could read them. And that is a fact that I included in my book because it's quite a personality trait. I was also delighted to include a dirty detail from a sidebar conversation in the courtroom transcript. It turns out that there were a few unsatisfactory blowjob attempts between Leopold and Loeb, who had a sex for crimes pact. Because of me, that tidbit is now in the greater L&L canon of adaptations. No one could have heard about it at the time because it was in a sidebar. And none of the historical books so far have included it because they aren't in it for like the dirty reasons like I am. In fact, the women reporters in the Roaring '20s were forced to leave the courtroom when any sex topics came up, but not the murder details, because go figure, in Al Capone's Chicago, they thought the talk of genitals would make the gals faint, but not gruesome killings. This writing method is like one of my all-time favorites, which is Poppy Z. Bright's Exquisite Corpse. And that novel has characters that are heavily based on serial killers Jeffrey Dahmer and Dennis Nilsen, but fictionalized so that they could meet and cause even more trouble. Basically, you take the best, leave the rest, and enjoy full artistic license because you're not a reporter or a historian. You're just here to have a good, bad time. So that is method number one for writing about real people.
Yeah. Okay. So talk to me more about your story and, don't give away the whole plot, but generally walk us through what you did as far as employing that method.
So the way it starts, because there was that touchstone between Nathan Leopold losing his mom and mine, that's where I started it, is the day of the funeral, basically. So the character is just like, I don't want to put up with any of these other people. I'm sad. Nobody else gets it, because that's something I can connect to with the character. Then it kind of backtracks and tells the story of their like birth to puberty, basically, like who their families are and how these two boys met. They were basically ridiculously smart. Leopold had an IQ that was unmeasurable. They both skipped a lot of grades, so they were teenagers in college. And basically they were the sons of millionaires. They were bored. They were too smart for their own good. And they were like, I bet we're smarter than the cops. Let's kill somebody. They selected a kid almost at random. That kid was actually a cousin of Loeb's. So they were easy talking him into the car, basically. Like, hey, come on in. I'll give you a ride home. I want to talk to you about a tennis racket. They hit him with the back end of a chisel. They taped up the blade. Knocked him out. He died of suffocation. And then they buried him badly by stuffing him in a culvert. So he was found very quickly. And their whole thing was they wanted to get a ransom. That failed. Leopold dropped his glasses next to the body. And they should have been very nondescript glasses, except they had a special hinge. Only 3 other people in the city had it. One was in Europe. The other woman had her glasses. And then there was Nathan Leopold. So that was that.
Now,
the process of the story goes right up until the murder, because every other story that's been written about Leopold and Loeb, and there are many of them, the movie Murder by Numbers is a Leopold and Loeb inspired story with Sandra Bullock and Ryan Gosling and Michael Pitt. There was a new one that came out, These Violent Delights, that came out since mine did, which is another based on Leopold and Loeb. In all of those stories, they really talk about the murder and or the trial, the big scandalous trial, because they called it the crime of the century in 1924 when they had like no business. It was such an early century. OJ hadn't even happened yet. They didn't know what they were talking about. But it was a huge deal for one summer. And I was tired of hearing about all that. So my contribution was all of the stuff that led up to the murder, because that was the part I was interested in too. The boys, how much they were boyfriends or not, that kind of stuff. So.
Now that part of it, did you have anything to draw on from that, or is that just because it's a part of what you do?
Which part?
Were they boyfriends?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, in the trial transcript, this is true facts. They were doing a sex for crime stuff. So Loeb was like, I want to do petty crimes. Do them with me. And Leopold was like, I want to rub my penis on you. How does that sound? And he was like,
I missed that. I thought you said sexual crimes. There was sex for crimes. So it was literally like, I will let you rub your penis on me if you will do crimes with me.
Yeah.
That is wild. I want to ask a question.
Like, kind of grinding, but they did try blowjobs once, according to the trial. Clarence Darrow, famed, like monkey trial attorney, had to sit there and just be like, yeah, so, didn't you guys go to college too? Calm down. Like he was judging the prosecutor, just being like, this guy acts like he's never heard of guys doing this to each other. I'm sorry, law school. He went to law school. You've never heard of it. So freaking out, trying to
look at Clarence Darrow's up there in the court like, I'm sorry, Judge, can we all grow up? We've all been to law school. We've all been blowing each other.
You've been in the world. You've met that guy. You know which his dorm is. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Man, I went to the wrong law school. I know that. So people listen to this right now. I think there's going to be a few things. One, you're right. You're writing about murderers, and it sounds like at least one of them was a sociopath, if not both of them. They were rich kids. There's not going to be a lot of sympathy. I mean, I personally right now don't have a lot of sympathy in my heart for them, but you did have to humanize them. I guess my first question about that is anyone around or alive that was closely associated with what happened here?
Not that I know of. They didn't have any children, so they don't have any descendants.
But what about the victims?
He had siblings. I'm sure they have family.
But the siblings are probably all. I mean, if you're just doing the math, they're probably either gone or very old.
Yeah, 1924. The victim Bobby Franks was 14 at the time, and he was, I think, the baby of the family. So nothing kind to do to that. That woman, his mother, Mrs. Franks. That's why I don't kill anybody, is I don't want to hear their mother crying on the other side of the courtroom.
Damn, that's the only reason. That's hilarious. I want to know when you're writing. I guess what I'm trying to get at is sounds like you have to, as any good writer would, think about these people as full human beings, which means having some level of at least empathy for them. Do you think about that? I mean, again, there's a lot of distance between you, a lot of time between you writing this and the event, but do you think about that in terms of, not making someone who did something horrible seem too sympathetic versus not making someone seem like a cartoon villain?
Yeah, it's a difficult line to walk. And it is why I went to the gravesite for Bobby Franks. That's a real child. That's somebody's little boy. That wrecked a family. But it also wrecked the families of Leopold and Loeb, because they thought they were having a nice life. And it turns out their younger sons were up to this insanity. Clarence Darrow pointed out in his oratory during the courtroom, it was actually a sentencing hearing, not a trial, because they pled guilty and it was just a matter of hang them or not. He pointed out that 3 families were grieving. 3 sets of parents had lost a son. And his point was saying murdering them back does nothing to heal anybody. All it is more death. So.
Did the jury agree with Clarence?
They skipped a jury because they were afraid of people being bloodthirsty. So it was just a judge. Darrow made that decision thinking that it would be a lot more difficult for one man to murder 2 boys, basically, to decide to kill them. They were young. They were 18 and 19. Loeb actually turned, I think, 19 in court. So he was supposed to be having a nice birthday. Really messed that up.
So wait, what did the judge decide?
He decided life plus 99 years. Loeb was killed in prison. Leopold eventually was paroled, and unfortunately, he's a terrible poster child for being paroled. So there are some people who think he really reformed, and he did a lot of good work. He started a prison school. He donated his work to helping cure malaria during the Second World War, volunteered himself to get infected with malaria to test the cure, and did a lot of the lab work because he was educated enough to do it. He donated his eyes when he died to people who needed eye transplants. So like, that all sounds pretty good. They let him out of prison. The argument for keeping him in is like, he's a danger to young boys. And it turns out when he got out, he was still grooming young boys. He was still like, he knew many languages. So he would write letters to like young men in multiple languages, kind of like tempting them to come to Puerto Rico where he had settled. He was taking advice from somebody who was much better at it. Yeah, not bad.
He found like a mentor, like a raping little boy's mentor.
Yeah, he liked him a little older than that guy and was just taking tips on like grooming. It's grim stuff. Wow. He also, because people did not know this, they let him dress up as Santa Claus and like let the little children come sit on his lap. So no. So
my man got out of prison after murdering a little kid, and then they let him dress up as Santa Claus. Man, the past sucked. I want to go back to Clarence Darrow. Obviously, that's a figure that for, I would imagine, 90-ish% of the population is just kind of a known American hero. Whatever. I mean, I'm sure if we looked into his background, maybe there's something dark in there. But generally speaking, people are like, I know who Clarence Darrow is. That was a great American. And not that Clarence needs advice from me, but letting the judge make the decision was the right move. When you're writing about somebody like that, you're going up against, and we're going to get into it later with even more known figures, you're going up against people already having an idea in their mind of what this person is like. I guess talk to me about the story process of that.
Well, so my book doesn't have a Darrow figure.
Okay.
Because it stops just before, like it's the planning of the murder. It's basically the making of two murderers. Like, here are these young boys. They hadn't killed anybody.
Sex for crimes, right? Sex for crimes. Is that what it is? Oh, okay. It's that saucy part. Ooh, that's sassy.
They literally, these little twerps, they wrote up a contract because they were law students themselves. And so they wrote up an actual contract and signed it, which is, you shouldn't create evidence like that. That was dumb.
That is the most law school student shit I have ever heard. It's like, we've learned one thing in week 3. We're going to do it right now and act like we know what we're doing without thinking about that in week 9 we were about to learn, never do this. Yeah.
If they were that smart, they either would have gotten away with it or not killed anybody and just enjoyed being rich. You know, like they could have done that too. So with huge figures. You what?
Oh, I said, sorry. I was saying that seems like that's hard to do. Just be rich and be happy.
Yeah, evidence shows.
Yeah.
They seem kind of empty. Like, where's your sense of purpose? You have to invent one yourself if you're rich. Everybody else has like goals set up for them. You know, like I want to get out of this situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd come up with something better than killing little boys for sex, though. Personally, I'm not trying to be self-righteous. I just think that I would come up with a purpose slightly. You know what I'm saying? Like that's why I don't want to get into politics right now. But the Hunter Biden versus the Trump Juniors thing for me, I'm like, dude, fuck Hunter Biden. But like having sex and doing drugs is like more fun than shooting lions.
Who's he bothering? Tell him to pay his taxes. Whatever. That's it. Just. He's not bothering anybody, right?
Right. So. Now, this method that we're talking about here, and I don't want to offend you, but fictionalizing real people, is that kind of what fanfic is? Is that a version of what? Mm-hmm. Is this fanfic? I mean, are you a fan of their work in a murder podcast way, not in a I like little boys dying way?
I would say yes. So I actually explain this as it's basically Leopold and Loeb fan fiction. There's a difference between fan fiction, which I used to write. I came up in the briar patch of fan fiction. Started with Harry Potter fan fiction, which is really great with J.K. Rowling out there just being like, I don't know that trans people are real like me. I wrote so
Pause
much
on
dirty
that.
stuff.
Does that mean that you wrote like about gay experiences from people in the Harry Potter universe?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was so
My
rad.
favorite pairing was Harry and Draco, like enemies in the streets, but friends in the sheets kind of stuff. Yeah. I had fun. So
Did you make Dumbledore gay before she did?
I noticed it before everybody else did.
Nice.
The letter that he sends to his friend Grindelwald is actually, to bring us back to the point, it sounds almost exactly like a letter that Leopold and Loeb exchanged, where it was like, I really like you. We make all these evil plans together. Like I could tell. I'm like, I have almost the exact. It's
I'll
called
let
in
you
the
rub your
court
dick on me.
transcripts. You what?
Unless you rub your dick on me, you're gonna cast that spell on that boy.
Basically,
Sign his
what
contract.
else is a wand, really? When you think about
Yeah,
it.
right. Right.
Leopold and Loeb had what was called the cocksucker letter. So there were rumors floating that they were gay together because they hung out too much. And so they almost broke up. You know, the band was on the skids, basically. And Leopold wrote a letter to Loeb saying, look, if we're going to stop being friends, that's fine. But we should probably like soften it so people don't think it's a breakup of two cocksuckers. Like, let's go out with some chaperones. Let's pretend we're still friends for like 6 months so that we don't become a story for these gossiping jerks. So that letter from Dumbledore to Grindelwald is kind of like, hey, you know, we have this past in history. It's got the same inflections. You're kind of a sociopath, but like, I still want to be friends.
The wand sucker letter. All right. I love it.
So
okay, so then let's talk about this other method. So this is fictionalizing real people is sort of a fanfic thing. This next thing is it also sort of a fanfic thing before you get into it?
Essentially, they can all be thought of that way. I mean, people like to think that historical novels, it depends on who you ask. If they're academics, they're like, no, it's completely different. This is very serious scholarship. It is fan fiction. Yes, it is. If you're just writing about a famous person because you think they're awesome and you want to write a whole book about it, like, I'm sorry, you're in the mud with the rest of us.
What if you hate them? Like, what if you write about somebody because you don't like them? You know what I mean? Like, what if somebody really took issue with
like they just super hate Hitler, but they want to write a book about it?
Yeah, or like, I don't know. I would imagine there's
That's a
plenty of
hate-on,
like
I think.
deranged stuff out there about Biden and Trump where people are writing stories about them doing things that they consider, you know, stupid or whatever.
Well, this is my personal opinion, but if you invest the kind of time and creativity of imagining what these people are doing, you must like it somewhere.
I hope people were in the middle of a tweet about someone they hate in politics right when you said that.
Think about how much time you're spending. The way I keep myself from like doing nasty stuff on the internet is like, why are these people worth my time? I don't even like them. Why would I spend? In fact, whenever I read a book that I hate, I don't leave any reviews on them. I only leave 5 stars reviews, and I only leave reviews for living authors. So if I read a book that I hate, I'm like, this is terrible. And you know what's better? The book that I love. So I'm going straight to Goodreads, and I'm telling that author how freaking awesome they are.
Oh, you doing right. You doing right. Yeah, I like all that. Yo. Man, I've had it in my head.
That's how I get in.
Yeah, man, I've been thinking about this, like, so I got this idea in my head anyway. But yeah, man, fucking, like, how more engaged we get with that sort of negativity, and how that, like, that stimulation is really, I don't know what that is, but channeling that thing into something positive is very rewarding. It's very rewarding.
And I'm a small time author. When I get a good review, I keep that forever. Hannibal Lecter, in one of the movies, the way they found out he was talking to somebody is that he couldn't throw out the compliments in the letter from whatever other psycho he was talking to. That's what you say one nice thing about me, I frame it. I keep it forever. I look at it when I'm feeling blue. It means everything to me. And to do that to other authors, to comedians, to other creatives, be like, you know what? I hate this person over here, and I'm going to take that energy and throw love at somebody who's going to keep it forever.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And also, just so everyone knows, you can find LA Fields on Goodreads, and there's some great reviews on there. Some really highly rated books, and yeah,
There are some great reviews.
check out
There are
the
a couple
work.
of snotty
Before we
ones.
move on to the second topic, one thing that I wanted to circle back to for my notes while you were talking. I did the fanfic question. Oh, that violence and sex. DJ left. That violence and sex point you made. You referred to how they used to make only the female reporters leave only during the sex parts, not during the violence parts. I don't know how much research you've done, but just the fact that you picked up on that, is that a very American thing? Is that a Western thing? Is that a world thing? And I'm asking because we're still doing that. We still will allow children to see some of the most violent things in the world, but they can't see a woman's breasts. Is that, as far as you know, and maybe you don't know, I know you're not an anthropologist or a sociologist, but you are a writer. Is that an American thing or is that bigger?
One thing I do know, because I've done research on this a couple of times, just as a pet project, the Motion Picture Association of America is basically a McCarthy level censorship thing. And the way it works is that violence is, there's been at least 2 documentaries, The Celluloid Closet and This Film Is Not Yet Rated, that discuss all of this. It's a censorship board. That's all it is. And it's their Puritan nonsense that's censoring it. Men can ejaculate all over film. Women, ew, disgusting. They will take it out of movies because they're uncomfortable with it. There's nothing objective about it. It's completely subjective. It's completely hidden. It's the shadow court. John Waters certainly hates it. The South Park guys hate it. Every creative person hates censorship. So the way they talk about it is that one person in one of these documentaries pointed out that it would be much safer to teach children about the bodies they actually have, the puberty that's about to hit them, sexuality that most kids are going to experience. Every once in a while, somebody's asexual, but they still have to live in this world with all these like horny other kids, right?
Yeah, I'm sure they'd like to know what asexuality is so that they don't have to think something's wrong with them for 2 or 3 years.
Meanwhile, they hide all that, like XX over 18 plus, no talking about it. But violence, cartoonish violence to children who can't understand it, completely warps what a gunshot does to somebody. It's not like, ooh, ow, I fall down, I push my guts back in, I'm fine. No, violence should be a lot more realistic. And that's the stuff, the cartoonish violence is what should be kept until people are old enough to understand the difference. I think that's a good argument. Like, you have to teach people to live in the world they actually are in. So like violence is real. And before you show them like crazy, silly cartoon violence, they need to understand the difference.
That's a great argument. We had you on here to talk about writing about real people in fiction, and now you're just fucking putting the gospel down. Let's get to this other topic. And on the surface, it is very similar to what we just talked about. On the surface, it sounds like the same thing, but you're about to explain to us the difference. So we were talking about fictionalizing real people and their story. And then this is talking about putting real people into fiction. Talk about the difference and talk about that with us real quick.
Yeah, so I'll go into another little speech. You're going to recognize a lot of names. One last thought from reviews. I'm learning this because I now write for law firms. I write for personal injury firms. When somebody leaves a review, it becomes the property of the law firm. So when somebody leaves a public review for me or for you, it becomes your property and you can market with it, which means there was a campaign once for one of my books where we only used bad reviews to be like, this book is the worst. I hate it. Why is this author so... So if you want to say something nasty about somebody, just understand that I own your words now and I can do what I want with them. So just keep that in mind.
Make it creative. Make it creative. If you're going to be hateful, make it creative.
Make us laugh. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So TED Talk Part 2. So next up is show and tell. My Dear Watson, Gaiety, and Mrs. Watson, Untold Stories. So I'll get a little closer. So My Dear Watson came first, and has a Sherlock Holmes who exists in the real world with Oscar Wilde and gross indecency trials, not the magical world of Dorian Gray and cursed portraits. So he walks among us, real people, in my version. Next came Gaiety, which is mini bios of LGBT folks from history, capped at 200 words each. So they're just little bonbons of information. If anybody has, like a surprise gay family member or something, a gay that's graduating, be like, oh, you're people, here you are. Learn something.
Say it just like
so
that.
it's a great stocking stuffer.
Wow.
Since I couldn't fit all my favorite history details into the Gay a Day coffee table book, I put some of those real people into the fictional frame of the latest book, which is Mrs. Watson, Untold Stories. In Mrs. Watson's diaries, I could feature all the gossip that was just too good to let go. For example, in Mrs. Watson, Untold Stories, Holmes and the Watsons talk of the Oscar Wilde crew, quoting letters, court transcripts, and newspaper clippings. One very sweet bit of information involves Oscar's good friend Robbie Ross, who's entombed with him in Paris. When Ross died of heart failure, it was after a lifetime of managing Oscar's estate for his wife and children and mentoring other young gay men in the arts. One of those men was poet Siegfried Sassoon, who remarked of Robbie's death, it was the only time that his art had ever failed him. So make friends with poets. They'll say beautiful things about you when you die. In another story, Holmes meets A.E. Housman, and portions of that conversation are taken verbatim from letters and biographies. True details like, despite being a very strict Latin professor and extremely paranoid about his privacy, Housman wrote highly sentimental rhyming poetry for his friend in unrequited love, Moses Jackson. He also liked dirty jokes. He laughed intensely when one man forgot to pack spare pants to give a university lecture and had to borrow a pair from Housman that needed to be split up the back to fit. On his deathbed, Housman was told a joke by the doctor and said as his more or less final words, "Very good, I shall have to repeat that on the golden floor." My Sherlock Holmes also knows what many people still don't know about Lawrence of Arabia, which is that he hired men to come whip him while he exercised naked under some elaborate "my uncle makes me do it" scheme. He was a very big masochist, and that's perhaps why he did so well in the punishing desert. In a different story, Holmes tells of Abraham Lincoln's best friend, Joshua Speed, who picked up that beanpole bumpkin on his first night in town. So, from Speed's own version of events, Lincoln arrived at Speed's general store asking for credit because he couldn't afford a bed. Speed said, "My bed's right upstairs," and Abe dropped off his bag, came back down to say, "Well, Speed, I'm moved." I bet he was. And what a sweet meet-cute moment. I also included details of some other men that Lincoln shared his bed with, like his presidential bodyguard, who made use of His Excellency's nightshirt on more than one occasion when Mrs. Lincoln was away. My Holmes also points out that there's one special edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, which has little sperms drawn on the title page, and that Lincoln once saw Walt Whitman walking all proud and languid across the street from the White House and said distractedly, "He looks like a man." And that's Abe's emphasis. That's in somebody's letter. I grouped the Mrs. Watson stories into little themed sets, like gay and lesbian kings and queens who were discussed over a game of chess. If you'd like to know what's gay about the King James Bible, it's King James. That's the first answer. Another story talks of suicide with people like poet and rough trade enthusiast Hart Crane, who, after being beaten for propositioning the wrong guy, this stuff is grim because it's a suicide story, he jumped off a boat to his death exclaiming, "Goodbye, everybody." That's it, just done. Also, mountaineer and skirts Freda Faur, who stuck her head in an oven after her lover was killed by Cure the Gay shock treatments. However, there are still two mountains standing in New Zealand that Freda climbed first and named after herself and her lover, Muriel. So they're still like wedding toppers, basically standing. In another story, we take a trip to the symphony to hear Tchaikovsky and learn that he was in love with his own nephew. He once wrote to the boy saying, "If you do not write, at least spit on a piece of paper, put it in an envelope, and send it to me. You're not taking any notice of me at all. God forgive you." There's a Halloween story for the deeply closeted Bram Stoker, who, funnily enough, married a woman who was once engaged to Oscar Wilde, which, yikes for her, because that's like a Judy Garland streak of gay husbands. That's bad. Just too many gay husbands and suitors. Another story talks of Boston marriages, which is when two unmarried women set up household together. In that one, the Watsons learn of Ann Lister, aka Gentleman Jack, who has her own HBO series right now, and I'm recommending that to everybody. They learn of Nell Pickerell, aka Harry Allen or Harry Livingston, pool sticker, brawler, and champion wooer of women, if the papers can be believed. And they actually can't, but I'm sure some of it's true. They learn of Albert D.J. Cashier, who was born Jenny Hodgers, a Civil War veteran who died in an asylum for women because doctors insisted he was crazy when they found out. Albert's death came from a fall after he tripped on the hem of a dress they made him wear. But he still had a funeral with full military honors supplied by the Grand Army of the Republic, that notoriously woke military. This writing method is like the books I'm reading right now, Narratives of Empire by Gore Vidal. That series features American historical figures like Lincoln and Aaron Burr. At the end of Burr, Vidal explains, I have tried to keep to the known facts. In 3 instances, I have moved people about, but otherwise the characters are in the right places, on the right dates, doing what they actually did. I did about the same with my historical novels, including going so far as to look up the museum pieces on display and a hotel's exact menu on a very particular day in history. So in conclusion, that's fiction writing around real people, and those are 2 examples of how it's done.
So
Wow.
let me, I guess, back up a little bit here and make sure I'm clear of what you're doing here. You're taking pieces or things that you found that are historically true, and then you're placing them in the world of Sherlock Holmes and or Mrs. Watson.
Yes.
But what relationship to the stories are Watson and or Holmes having? Is this a Sherlock Holmes story in which in the middle of it we've also got these things, or is the story about, you know, these other figures, and what's the interaction there?
It's pretty evenly shared. The premise of My Dear Watson is that Holmes and Watson were secretly lovers, that Holmes is not a bachelor because he's married to his work. He's a bachelor because he's actually into men. That's why he's hanging out boxing with the underclass. That's why he's down by the docks. That's why he knows all these street people. He's in the life. Watson is more of a bisexual person who got just enchanted by Holmes only, but otherwise would have been just marrying women and being a normal person. So that's my version of it. In that situation,
so now you're taking these characters who exist and you're changing them, which is so beautiful.
Mhm.
And then in that world, you're running them into people from history like Oscar Wilde, but there you're sticking to real stories, right?
Yes. My college thesis was a comparison between the double lives in Dorian Gray, Jekyll and Hyde, and Sherlock Holmes, the way he was both a detective on the good side, but because he understood the villains so well, that's how he caught them. There was a very interesting exchange between him and Moriarty, where Moriarty walks in and he goes, basically like, is that a gun you're fingering under the table? Are you just happy to see me? Kind of thing. He was just like, would you take that out? I know what you're up to. That is almost verbatim. It's very fun. So if you assume that that's why Holmes doesn't have a wife, he lives in the same time as Oscar Wilde. There was no gay man who wasn't aware of what happened to Oscar Wilde, because when he went to jail, people fled. They're like, I'm moving to France. I'm moving to Italy. I don't want to go to jail under these Puritans. Oscar Wilde was encouraged to leave and didn't. So he became a huge martyr and figure for everybody else. And in a lot of ways, a warning sign. There's speculation that that's why Bram Stoker invented Dracula, is because he was so disgusted by somebody like Oscar Wilde. He was so afraid of becoming somebody so decadent and so, like, I guess, just public about what he was up to. That's where the closeting, the coffining basically comes in. Because of the Victorian time period, if all gay men know who Oscar Wilde is, guess what? Oscar Wilde knew everybody. Like, all his friends. It's just like if anybody saw the L Word, that big web of everybody connected. Dude, kind of. There are gay men alive today who can draw a straight line back to somebody who slept with Walt Whitman. People know each other. They hang out in the same spots. So in knowing that everybody who was contemporary to Sherlock Holmes or older, I was like, I can fit them in. So he meets A.E. Housman. Housman had a gay brother. His gay brother once met Oscar Wilde. And one of the sweet stories was that Oscar Wilde, after he got out of prison, both of the Housman brothers, unaware that the other was doing it, sent him the latest copy of their books. And when he went to the post office in like Italy or France or wherever he was at the time, he saw like one Housman, the other Housman, and it made him smile. And he said that it was one of very few smiles at that time. His health was trash, his reputation. So he was like, he told Lawrence Housman, like, that gave me a very rare smile. Thanks for that. So little stories like that are just, they're so sweet. And I've got to put them somewhere. And so the way the Mrs. Watson books work is it's her diaries. And she's like, this Sherlock Holmes coming into my house, definitely still flirting with my husband, but I'm a modern woman. I let him have fun. That's not bothering my marriage. It's not like he's going to move in and cook. Holmes slowly makes friends with Mrs. Watson and starts to tell them little stories like, gather, Watsons, come to my knee, I will tell you, would you like to know something interesting about President Lincoln? Would you like to know what's gay about this here Bible? So as a super sleuth, basically he knows everybody's secrets before they're published, and I was able to know them. So if it happened while he was alive, I'm like, great, we're going to pretend that he knows, and he's going to tell the Watsons all the hot goss.
Sherlock's in here at dinner just outing people.
Yeah.
That ain't cool.
Yeah.
He's doing it privately, though, among friends.
And if you were interested in Buchanan, the president before Lincoln, the one who got us into the Civil War, and then Lincoln who got us out, he was referred to, he was one of the, I think, the only president who wasn't married. So his first, lady was his niece. People would call him and his like very good friend, Miss Fancy and Aunt Nancy, every time they went places together. Like, oh, where's your better half? When the man he was very fixated with, like moved away, he would write letters saying, I have to go a-wooing to other gentlemen now because my main guy isn't here. Yeah, good drama.
That is good drama. Now, when you find these stories and you get the newspaper clipping or you get the letter, how much do you allow yourself to either deviate or expand? I mean, do you try to stick to what's inside these letters or newspaper clippings or stories, or are you like, this is the little nugget, but I'm going to go wherever I want with it?
Well, I take those nuggets and I don't mess with them. So like I'll take a quote or a letter or a specific story and kind of like, that's an unmovable part. And then the rest of it, I wrap the story around it. So like the setup of Mrs. Watson being like, well, I'm hanging out in my house and Sherlock Holmes just came by and he's telling this interesting story. Here it is. And then sometimes stories will be moved around. So like obviously Sherlock Holmes never met A.E. Housman. Somebody else did though. And the guy was like making like filthy jokes about the Latin names of plants and stuff. And they were like, that's not what I expected from him, based on his poetry, his reputation. So those are the secrets that I need access to through the story. And I don't want to change those because they're so delightful. I wouldn't change them for anything. Those.
Right.
That's
Do you add to them though in order to make the story complete?
Sometimes, I mean, the story, this is why it's kind of in a frame from Mrs. Watson, so that I can tell the story without having to like speculate too much about the real person. Right. She's just hearing one true story, and adding it up.
Right. Yeah, she's got her gossip column. That is her diary.
Yeah.
That's so rad. Now, do you write stuff that doesn't involve people, historical people?
I do. Let's see.
Okay. And what's the difference there in terms of, I mean, do you approach it the same? Is it like, look, I'm a writer and I'm creating a story, or is there a real difference in the, I guess, technique or whatever?
When it's just my own fiction, there's a lot of, sometimes I'll put pieces of me in there. I sort of think of them as time capsules. So one time when I was a kid, I was like out of my swimmy wings and I was pretty close to drowning in a pool. My cousin noticed. All the adults had gone inside. But he turned around and was like, wait a minute, Lauren can't swim. Jumped in, saved me, never told anybody about it. Those little moments from life, I like to like couch in fiction places. I'm not talking about my family. I'm not talking about any secrets that anybody wants to keep. But these little memories that probably other people don't even remember, I like to put them somewhere. And those are the moments that people recognize as readers as being like a true thing because it was true for me. Once when I was a kid, somebody gave me a bath in like a big sink because they just didn't have a tub and they weren't used to kids. So they're like, well, just put her in clear the potato peelings and put her in the sink. And I was like, okay. Yeah. So like those little things where I'm like, that's going to go somewhere. Because it's just like a little, I can think of them as like snow globes, these little snow globe memories. I'm like, pull this one, and add it to a story. I started out with young adult. So this spray of 5 young adult, these are all mostly Florida kids with Florida drama. A lot of after school special stuff like unattended pregnancies, self-harm, alcohol, all the trouble I could think of. So those are the most like juvenile books that I have. This is short stories. This is scholarship. This is the an annotated version of America's first gay book, possibly, depending on how you think of it or categorize it. And then I also write little erotica short stories for.
There's a lot of erotica in all of these. Have you done that most of your life?
Well, that's why I started reading when I was in high school. You know, you just like a horny, repressed teen. You know, just being like, I can't do anything that could wreck my life, but I can certainly read about it. So, apparently, I was actually caught once in the secret corners where people would go to smoke to read my like sexy vampire books. Anne Rice has some gay vampires, so I was excited about those. And that, like, I accidentally learned history by reading about vampires. I was like, oh, cool, that's when the French Revolution was. Interesting. Ooh, and then he had a boyfriend. Good. But I got caught once by like the deputies on campus being like, what are you doing back here? Do you have cigarettes? And I'm like, I'm just reading. And they're like, and the book isn't hollow, full of cigarettes? No. And they're like,
down there in Florida.
Good.
We caught her back here reading.
It happened twice. But they mostly were just like, don't hide in the bushes. It's weird. So I was like, okay, I'll hide in plain sight.
Were you gothy?
For a little bit. I was kind of witchy for a couple of years.
In the bushes reading your vampire books. That's awesome. That's adorable. DJ, do you have any questions, brother?
No. This is lovely.
Hey,
I
where
got caught
can they
reading
find you?
twice, actually. But once was a gym teacher who, he literally looked at us, my friend and I, we were leaving the weight room alone for his athletes. And he was like, he almost tripped on us coming out of a stairwell because it was raining, so we couldn't go to our usual spot. And he was like, you guys are just out here reading books. You serious? Here's a hall pass. Permanent hall pass. Go ahead. Like, just, some of you kids have to read. The meatheads are in here. You guys read. Perfect.
Yeah, that's a good teacher. That's great. Yeah. I want to give you the chance to plug. Where can people find you and your books and all that?
So I'm LA Fields, wherever you get books. Goodreads, Amazon, Leafy Press, and Rebel Satori Press are my indie booksellers that publish me. On Twitter, I'm author_LA Fields. On Instagram, I'm LA_Fields. You can see lots of pictures of my cat. I recently found a picture from childhood of me either walking a goat or being walked by the goat, but there was a leash involved.
Yeah.
That's rad. I want to ask, is it okay if people, hit you up and ask you questions? We've got quite a few writers who follow us, and I'm sure they may have questions about, like, how do you break in? Because it seems like, with comedy, it's hard, but you just go to open mics and then you meet people, but there's no equivalent to that I know of with writing. Are you cool with people hitting you up about that sort of thing?
Definitely. I did teach for a little bit, and I enjoy getting, other writers and especially just people who are fans of the same kind of stuff I am fans of. Like, oh, Leopold and Loeb. There's a very niche community of Leopold and Loeb enthusiasts just being like, look, these are terrible boys. And
sex for crimes, man. Sex for crimes, man. You can't beat that. That's the money right there.
Yeah, some people like Bonnie and Clyde, some people like Leopold and Loeb. So yeah, people can definitely talk to me.
You just remind me of one more thing I wanted to ask. This is an unfair question, but it's on everyone's mind. Why are serial killer types or killer types, if they're men, especially if they're a little handsome, especially if there's any extra salaciousness, like you can rub your penis on me if you do crimes with me, what is the true crime obsession in America? What is that about?
My theory is that, I spend a lot of my life inside because I am terrified of, like, car ports, basically, like, the streets at night, and and like home invasions. I think what happens is that when people are afraid of things, to contain it, you have to turn it into something that gives you power over it. And so, like, when you look at true crime, in some instances, people think that they're learning, like, oh, if I just keep to the lighted streets, if I know this, if I know that, I can protect myself. But sometimes that kind of, like, the way when you deny information about something, like, it could later become a fetish because you've made it repressed. I think that's part of it, because it's so forbidden to to kill and to do sex crimes and all this stuff. I think the fear centers of the brain are probably close to the like stay alive centers, and then it turns into like a weird like fascination. So
Right. Yeah, definitely. Wow, so many things were going on in my brain right there. I was thinking about sex. I was thinking about I process things through jokes probably because I have some weird thing and that's the only way I can process the world. Bill Burr has a great joke about how they only show one part of a woman's sexuality in these dumb rom-coms. They never show the part of like, fucking choke me, but don't hurt me, but make me think you're going to. So I was thinking about the sexuality part of your brain getting touched on. I was also thinking about you said that about control and power. It does seem like it's a cliche, but there's some truth in it. It's mostly women that seem to be obsessed with most of these true crime docs and podcasts. And obviously there's a power dynamic of, Dahmer killed boys, but for the most part, these fucking guys are killing women.
I don't know, man. Fucking dude, a lot of them be killing dudes, though. That fucking
Younger ones, but still, there's like a feeling from women's perspective, I would imagine, of like, there's danger in the fucking world.
Yeah, and we're also raised with that from like day one, from the jump. It's just, don't you trust any men, even the ones double check. Double check with me. Ask your aunt. I was given those talks. Actually, so in the Gaiaday book, there was a theme that happened. So basically, when you leave women alone, like lesbians, they just they'll start a school that teaches nursing. They'll adopt kids. They get stuff done. When you leave men alone, it's like war and fashion and serial killers. They're animals when left without women to
fashion
control.
Or fascism?
Fashion. But they do go together. Ernst Röhm of the Nazis, he's in this book. If you've seen the outfits for the Hitler Youth, it's boys in like little shorts and stuff. It's fucking gay.
Is that why they say slay when fashion? It's like you're
Possibly.
literally killing people in your uniform.
Everything's ruthless. Basically, I kind of figured out that like you'll find bisexuals in entertainment because they're people pleasers, and you'll find trans and intersex people in justice and human rights because nobody knows what it is to be human than somebody who's like just rejected from everybody and can't find a comfy spot to fit in. So.
Wow.
What a rad point you're making.
Yeah,
man, what a great episode. Thank you so much. Is there any final thoughts or questions from either of you?
No, man, that was great. Thank you so much for being on. That was great.
Yeah. If anybody ever cancels on you, I'm happy to just run my mouth on anything. So you just keep me in mind.
Oh yeah. We'll have lots of questions. Thank you so much. And follow LA, everybody. Appreciate y'all. Love you. Bye.
Yeah. Get out there and read. Bye.
I want to do the fart dance. The fart dance. It's my fart dance.
Good Lord, she looks like death eating a bit.